thanks everybody. Good little bit of trivia, giving out some prizes there. So Kathy adding more to your pack when it arrives. So thanks for those who have managed to get to their little desktop audit exercise. I've had a look at those. I haven't actually started the marking yet, but I've certainly looked through quite a number, and I'd say that we're looking really good with this group in terms of the way you're thinking about issues, finding issues, writing them up in a nice methodical way. So that's really good. And some fairly logical risk rating. So I was fairly happy with that. Yeah, and the one thing I suppose, I think there's a little bit more work to be done from some people. Some people seem to get it, was just that refinement of the categorization of any recommendations into primary or supporting safe system. And I do admit this is a new thing. It's fairly hard to get our head around, and it's the wording of it's a little clunky, which Austroads decided to use back when they sort of put these categorizations out, but nonetheless. But I thought maybe I'd just run through one which seemed to be slightly, well, I suppose it highlights this in a pretty clear way. Now I know a number of you also put this up as one of your findings, so it's probably a good one to do. So hopefully you can see the PDF there, Kathy. Yep. So we've got here, this was just one that a number of people picked up, and it's the arrows in the median are pointing for a left turn and a straight. The left turn would put you into the carriageway coming down there. So there's the description. The plans show left turn and straight pavement markings in the median of Victoria Place. Then, you know, saying here, while it's assumed this is a drafting error and should be right straight, the auditors are concerned that if marked this way, the driver will be confused, drive the wrong way down the eastbound carriageway, Victoria Parade. This could result in a head-on crash. Particularly, this is particularly a risk late at night where there are a few other vehicles, thereby giving wrong way direction opportunity and the opportunity to get up some speed. So if there's vehicles parked there waiting, it's going to be not bad, but it's if somebody can get down there and get some speed up. But anyway, I suppose I'm not pointing out that part of it. There's a risk rating and then the energy levels. Now, interestingly on this one, the energy levels probably within that, just under that 70 kilometre, if you even got up there, which the head-on crashes can take a higher speed energy. So you need to go back to those curves. But not really pointing out all this. What I wanted to concentrate on was something like this, where, okay, the treatment is obvious to just change around the line marking, isn't it? And you just say it as it is. But you do still even categorize this. And this is probably one where it's fairly vivid on the example here, where you would be very tempted to say that that's a primary treatment, to change the line marking around. But the reality is that changing the line marking around doesn't sort of physically stop somebody turning the wrong way if they're confused, they haven't seen things. It certainly helps people not do that. But that's not really, virtually eliminating that crash type in that potential. So to do that would be a lot more of a physical treatment or something that would have to try to do that. So that is really just a supporting treatment. I mean, it's very important supporting treatment, but it is a supporting treatment, and that's, I suppose, another indication of where primary in these situations does not mean necessarily your number one recommendation. It's primary safe system categorization. So go back to those module 1 notes, have a read of that, try and get your head around it. Now, we've given you a sample road safety audit on your memory stick and in Schoology, and so you can read through that. You can calibrate a bit of your thinking around that. So that was, I just thought I'd bring that up now. And if anybody has any questions about that, and I'll get to marking those. If anybody hasn't is having any troubles, get in contact with me, and and that'll be fine.
And we just, there's a few people that haven't managed to get it in. It was a pretty tight time frame, so that's okay. Do get it in when you can, but there's no penalties for lateness or anything like that. Ken's not that harsh in his marking.
No,
anyway.
That's right. We do like you to get them in so we can sort of provide this feedback live or give you some hints or help you along the way. I mean, the reality is that we need to get all the assignments in and everything marked and all the quizzes done before we issue your certificate and get you over that pass mark. And but you've certainly got a bit more time on that. Awesome. Now keep those questions coming in through the chat or the Q&A while I take you through some of the specific road users. Remember we did the first session there on general, what is road safety audit and what's the process, and delving into a bit of the risk, how do we risk assess things, and what are the stages of audit, what are the steps of the different audit process. Then we went into looking at pedestrians, and as the first road user, we looked at in this isolated form. Jamie Robinson last time talked a lot about heavy vehicles and swept cars and buses and some of the needs of those larger vehicles and the detailed design audits. Tony Bull talked to you a bit about construction site and road safety auditing, and I talked a little bit about and pointed you at the checklists that you'll be able to use. We've got some road users to finish off with, cyclists and motorcyclists, two-wheeled road users. And so that's what I'm going to be covering today. Then, Kathy, am I right? At the end of today, it is off to do the road safety audit.
Yes, that is correct. And so in Module 5 in Schoology, there's your site in there, which is anywhere from an 8-minute to hopefully no more than a 15-minute drive away from your home location or work location. And have a look at that. And if there's any issues there, do get in touch with me. But basically in the Module 5 fault, I think you'll go through this towards the end though, Ken, but there is your site location that you'll do a site visit on, and then you'll write your mock road safety audit report up from there.
Thanks, Kathy. And I might get you for the end to just bring Schoology up so we can live sort of go and find all that and have a look at what we need to do. But we'll cover that at the end. But you will all be given a design of some description. And just to clarify this, when we're road safety auditing a design, we are trying to find the issues that will be there once it is constructed, not what's currently there. Once it's all constructed, what will the road safety issues be? Either issues that have not been removed or eliminated, or new issues that have been created by the way that this new infrastructure has gone in on the road network. There is an existing conditions road safety audit you can do where you don't have a design and you're just looking at a bit of road, but that's not what we're getting you to do for the exercise. We want you to be looking at designs. Okay, cyclists. So we want to have a little bit of a chat today about the requirements of cyclists for safe travel, or maybe I should say the requirements of people who ride bikes for safe travel. That's a sort of a term that a lot more people are trying to use to make sure we're all reminded it's people. The source some technical information regarding cycle paths, shared paths, cycling facilities, identify some common road safety audit issues for cyclists when we're doing audits of either the road network or shared paths or where they interface. Understand basic cycling facility terms, treatments and the terminology. Okay, so this very high level, cyclists are requiring separation, clear sight lines, space to ride, a decent surface, speed maintenance, which I'll come back to, which is often a you know, a rideability quality, less so a road safety quality, but it can have some road safety implications if you are not providing that ability for a rider to keep riding at a certain, you know, at a certain pace. Connectivity and information. So one of the things we often talk about is trying to think like a cyclist. Think things like, you know, where would I ride here? Where would I position myself? Where would you know, would a car be able to see me here? Would I, if I'm, you know, what if somebody opened their door here? And you're trying to think through all these sorts of things from the cyclist perspective, but also the driver's perspective. Will they be able to see cyclists and the like? Now, when I say cyclist or a person that rides a bicycle, you know, what are we talking about? And what we do like to try to do is sort of think about the 8-year-old cyclist, think about the 80-year-old cyclist. And if you've catered for them, in a lot of the cases, we've catered for all cyclists. There are some slightly unique sort of types of cyclists that we find it very hard to create facilities for, often referred to as mammals, the middle-aged men in Lycra, and is the acronym. And I'll probably have to put my hand up and say I'm a mammal, so I do get out and ride a bit, and have been seen in the Lycra. And it's a slightly different beast in terms of providing facilities, but there are things that we certainly can do to improve this. But one of the things early on when you're doing a road safety audit is to understand the strategic context in which we're working. Is this on a principal bike network? Is it on a strategic cycling corridor? Is it a highly used cycle facility? Or, you know, are there going to be a lot of cyclists using this? It helps you to understand the level of facilities you might be recommending, the level of risk that it's going to be for cyclists. And certainly, if we're creating these shared path facilities, separated facilities, and we are trying to encourage these sorts of riders, we really got to be thinking about how we address the conflict points at road crossing points, and those sorts of things as well in a greater way. There is a mountain of guidance out there for looking at cycle facilities and trying to understand the risk. And I'm going to just highlight a few, and we've put a lot of these onto your memory stick, if not, I think all except one onto your memory stick. And then there's lots of others. And I suggest you get onto your jurisdiction website, whatever jurisdiction you're in, and you have a look at what guidance they've got, and lots of information. But in the actual Austroads Guide to Road Safety, Part 6, Road Safety, Managing Road Safety Audits, and 6A, Implementing Road Safety Audits, there is bicycle stuff in there. In the checklist or prompt list, there are some bicycle questions. This document, I think, is a great document that not too many people know about. It's a little old now. It's probably due for a refresh, but it's got some pretty good principles in there. And it is Shared Path Audit Guidelines, and it was produced by Vic Roads. So I think there's a few good things in there that you should be having a look at if you are asked to do a road safety audit of a shared path facility, which is something that you can do. The Austroads guides, the main sort of things we're looking at there are the Guide to Road Design, Part 6A, Paths for Walking and Cycling. And then this little document, which is the cycling aspects of the Austroads Guide, which was this document to try to collect lots of different bits of the Austroads Guides that dealt with cycling and cycling safety and connectivity and all those sorts of things. There is the Australian Standard, which is 1742 Part 9, which is bicycle facilities, and that goes into a lot of the very specific details, as the Australian standards do, on quite a number of different cycling related things. In Victoria, there's these 3 documents which I worked on with some colleagues. One of them is bicycles and pedestrian treatments at roundabouts. One is treatment of bicycle car dooring collisions, so when a door opens in front of a cyclist. And the design guidance for strategically important cycling corridors and sort of the considerations. Lots of good info in there. I like Melbourne City Council's new bike lane design guidelines. I think they're a good document and again, something you can look at. So you're seeing lots of stuff here. And the one that, you know, a lot of people see as the real world's best to a degree is the Crow manual out of the Netherlands and design manual for bicycle traffic. That's the one that's not in your notes, but you can find that one and purchase it if you're really keen, or maybe your organisation has a copy. There's a number of jurisdictions have their own cycling audit guidelines, and I've got a few tips and tricks in a fact sheet on doing a cycling specific audit, which I've provided you as well. But there's a huge amount of documentation out there. So if you're doing these things and getting into it, you should be really trying to keep up to speed with these new ways to think about cycling facilities. So I'm going to take you through some of the things that appear in these, but obviously can't get through all of that. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and some things to consider when we're doing audits and we're thinking about cyclists, regardless of whether it's a job that is only, you know, it's a cyclist improvement job, or whether it's just a different improvement or a public transport job, or whatever it is, we still want to be considering all these road users.
And just before you do jump straight into it, could you just take us through, there is quite a bit of documentation and support for cyclists that you've gone through there. Take us through perhaps why sometimes people think they should be registered when we're providing, you know, quite a bit of safety infrastructure for them. Could you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, slightly off the audit topic, but a very interesting debate to have nonetheless. You know, I think that cyclists and riding has lots of other, you know, economic benefits and the like in terms of any sort of charging of cyclists. Not sure that would be right. They're not impacting on the infrastructure significantly, and reduce congestion, improve health outcomes, and the like. In terms of ability to sort of enforce behaviours and the like, we do struggle a little bit in some scenarios in that sense. So that might be an advantage to having some sort of tagging identification system there. But I think you can very much put together a wonderful business case for more cycling all round. And so you want to actively encourage that at the levers of economics rather than discourage it with anything. So that's a pretty simplistic answer, and I have, you know, an interest in that, but wouldn't say I'm an expert in transport economics or anything like that. From a road safety perspective, I'm a bit more focused on these sorts of issues where we know risks for riders. So I'll bring us back to that if that's all right, unless there's more questions, Kathy.
No, that's it for the moment. Thank you.
I put this one up as just like road safety audit, thinking about cyclists, absolute classic, like #1 is longitudinal grates. And it's just a very much a thing that we need to look out for. So we've, you know, reduced lots of the instances of longitudinal grates out there. So because cyclists, you know, dropping their tire in and then going over the handlebars and the like, and so it's been pretty well looked at. But your job is, as an auditor, to keep an eye out for these sorts of things. Now, this one, I mean, I've done now a number of expert witness cases where this has been the issue, and it hasn't been picked up. It's been there, it's been there for a long time, but it hasn't been picked up by the road manager. And the one that stands out to me was a shopping centre development that was doing a big redevelopment and then putting in lots of bike stands and bike facilities, and has really done a lot to encourage bike riding via a certain route. Now, nobody sort of looked at that route from a safety perspective. And of course, there were longitudinal grades on that route, and somebody has no doubt, or somebody did go into it and seriously injured themselves. And so it's a very hard argument for the developer there to argue that they weren't expecting cyclists because they were actively encouraging them through that route, and it's really a sort of lack of that thinking. Now, a road safety audit would have helped there, no doubt, and that would have been a great facility, but I dare say that anybody should have hopefully sort of thought about some of those characteristics, but auditing would have been good. So it's something you definitely want to keep an eye out for. And you get some big ones in different locations, and it's important to think about these. Another common road safety audit finding straight off the bat is, jump straight into some details here, is a a T intersection. You got a T intersection, and there's a signalised T intersection, and it's going to have a left turn arrow when it's got the green for the vehicles coming out here. And in this job, they were creating these bike facilities and putting bike storage boxes just in front of every area. Now, of course, at some point in time, a cyclist will be stored here, wanting to go straight because that's what it's there for, so they can be visible and out in front of traffic and the like. And we're going to have a vehicle behind wanting to turn left or coming in to turn left. Now, the risk rating on this one's pretty hard to do as a road safety auditor, because you sort of think, well, it's low likelihood that it's actually going to be a crash because they're right in front of them and they see it. Maybe there'll be an instance where they're sort of moving in and they're starting and it's going to be fairly low speed. There's going to be some road rage issues, I'll give you that, because, if you've got a couple of cyclists here and you want to turn left, you'll be beeping, and or the driver behind will be beeping at you as a cyclist. So it's a bit hard to risk rate, but I think in these sorts of things, alerting to this and it will be removed from that design, and that's good. If we can get it out of the design stage. So this is a find the issues one. It's not a pop-up quiz, but I'm going to show you a scene. Here's the scene, and what you're going to do is just type in some issues that you see that are safety issues for cyclists. And I'll chuck in there a little prize if you can tell me which country that's in. So just jot in the chat there or the Q&A, depending on what you've got available, any issues that you can see. Right, here we go. Okay, so the prize for the country, it was close on timing, but Andrew's come through with the goods with Wales, very closely followed by Jake. Can we give Jake a second prize there, Kathy? Maybe a Freddo Frog or something. It is Wales, and I assume you speak Welsh. My Welsh is good. That actually translates to cyclist dismount. So we're seeing there, though, some issues. So sight lines to oncoming traffic we're seeing. Cyclist dismount not conspicuous. Some people are saying sight distance by the fence. Tiles are longitudinal. Yes, so some challenges with the tiles there. Fence, lots of people. Yeah, people aren't liking those tactiles. There we go. Somebody's identified the longitudinal. Great. So it's good for that direction, but not so good going the direction that all the cyclists are going to be going. And some good issues brought up there. So thank you. So it really does, I suppose, just as a nice little exercise to highlight quite a few sort of principles of these cycling facilities and the like. So we've identified there's a sightline issue. As a cyclist comes up here or a car is coming along here, they don't have those sight lines open up to be able to see and act accordingly. So no doubt this is why our Welsh traffic engineers have put up the cyclist dismount sign. Now, is a cyclist dismount sign going to be an effective road safety countermeasure? Well, it's pretty low on the effectiveness scale. And I mean, I think we've got to avoid that, idea that, putting that up is going to alleviate the issue. And we see very sort of comical things where we've identified that cyclists should be dismounting, and we see sort of things like this. This is somewhat towards that speed maintenance idea for a cyclist and the safety aspects of it. Is a cyclist going to dismount, walk across each one of these? No. I mean, it's ludicrous to even think that would happen. That's a waste of signage. If there are inherent sort of safety issues at these locations, we're not going to fix them with those signs. So, understanding and thinking about things that way is quite important. The longitudinal grade, this stuff, absolutely. Could this fence be cut down so there's those sight lines open up? That might be an option. Could we even give priority to this shared path across this road? We need to know a bit more about the context, but that may be a possibility, and that would certainly help things. Even better would be a raised sort of priority across there, which I can show you. I'll show you some of later. So these are all good findings. The tactiles, that might be a sort of lower order risk for a cyclist who destabilizes or the like. In a similar sense, I suppose I'll show you this audit finding here. I'm not going to read it all in detail, but this is a new big subdivision that's gone in, and they've put the shared path right up next to the property boundaries, which is an interesting approach. But you can see here that on quite a number of them, the garage was placed here, high fence right up to boundary, and so you'd imagine cars pulling out there and cyclists coming along here, and you've got this conflict point. So the audit recommendation really to open up those sight lines and try to make that much easier to see. And these are sort of supporting, because it's not physically eliminating that, it's still requiring the road users to be looking and like. Safe system energy, potentially within tolerable. I mean, the energy on this one's likely to be the cyclist's energy in terms of the speed they're traveling on that shared path, and hitting the car as it sort of comes out. And you kind of feel it's most cases likely to be in that sort of 20 kilometre per hour or lower range. The sort of the mammals, the lycra-clad mammals, get out there at the 30 and sometimes up to the 40 kilometres on their sort of flat roads, but these sort of commuter style is going to be fairly low. It's not to be confused with it not being quite a an incident and potentially some injury, but into that fatality and sort of very severe injury, it's quite unlikely that it'll result in that. But nonetheless, it's definitely identified as something to be rectified. This was quite an interesting one because that was part of the council's structure plan or whatever, standard design for specific lots that would have this. And that was presented to the council, and they said, oh, well, that's the standard. And as an auditor, you go, well, okay, that's your standard, but it doesn't mean it's not a risk. And it was, still presented. They were actually asking whether it could be removed, which is a sort of big no-no of a client in a road safety audit. And we cover that in module 6. Asking if it could be removed because it's a standard. Of course, we said no, can't be removed, and it's staying there. And it did end up meaning that they altered that specific part of their planning scheme or whatever it was. Surface issues, grates, depressions, whatever these sort of things are, they present that initial risk for riders in terms of hitting it, destabilising and the like. The other one to just keep in mind is that riders may avoid these and push themselves into more dangerous areas. Another common audit finding, I suppose this is a common finding in a number of scenarios, is your lanes don't line up through an intersection. So maybe this has been, a new leg added to an intersection, or something has been altered for one reason or another. But you can see here, this lines up with the footpath. This one lines up with that lane, and where it should be going over to this lane. And so what we have is, you get lots of sideswipe crashes in here with vehicles. So a vehicle sideswiping a vehicle, because this one's trying to get over to this lane, but this one thinks that's their lane for some reason. And we have a lot of sideswipe crashes. Sideswipe crashes usually being not so severe. We don't like them, and we try and get rid of them, but not the most severe incident out there. But the cyclist is the one that ends up getting the big injuries out of this, because they're ticking along trying to get into the left lane, and we've got this other vehicle squeezing around there, and it's quite a mix, and the cyclists. So you'll see often people, certainly back in the day, would be looking down their roll plot to see the things line up. What's the geometric layout of this design? Often these days doing it with just drawing some lines on your screen and the like to see how things line up. Another area of interest for us is that point where you sort of have these parked cars just after an intersection where maybe there's been a stand-up lane, or there's been a bit of no parking to get that ability. So we've got the cyclist ticking along there, and of course the car that is coming along here, well, they're concentrating on trying to merge back in. So it's not a great point there for cyclists. It's a very hard thing to treat a lot of the time, but some ideas are to provide those sort of cyclist facilities that can separate. There's different intersection treatments, protected intersection treatments available, which I'll show you a few things as we go. Cyclists at roundabouts has always been an issue that has not been well dealt with. We've finally got to some pretty exciting roundabout designs for cyclists. But there was a point in time where the best design advice was to push the cyclists as far to the edge of the roundabout as possible, thinking that, well, we're getting them as far out of the way as possible from vehicles in these lower speed environments. And then we had two main troubles. One was cars squeezing past cyclists or trying to accelerate past cyclists at a very close proximity. The next one was this sort of look but failed to see phenomenon, look but did not see phenomenon, where a car approaching here and you've got a cyclist tucked very close to the the edge, and the driver sort of looks. And the phenomenon, I mean, the behavioral psychologists and the human factors people love this phenomenon, which is the look prefer to say. They look directly in this area, but what they're looking for in their subconscious is a car. And the cyclist doesn't register as something that they should be stopping for until it's a bit later. It's just that lag between, oh, I got to stop for them as well. And so we do see some crashes. But there was a bit of work done to show that if you could pull the cyclists into more the same line that a car would be, and that there's more indication that a driver would see and react to this. If you're interested in this phenomenon, have a look at, just Google look but failed to see crashes, or look but did not see crashes, and you'll just get a mountain of human factors reports and behavioral psychologists, information on this, and threat theory and all sorts of wonderful stuff. So the next generation of advice and design guidance on these sort of back street or lower volume, lower speed areas with cyclists was to create the cyclists claiming the lane and getting into the middle, and the use of these little markings. And the first person to type in what these markings are actually called can have a prize as well. All right, so Jake in there, quick as lightning with Sharrow. That's right, they're Sharrows, which is sort of a combination of the word shared and arrow. But it's indicating that this space in the road is an area where cyclists and vehicles will share the same bit of pavement. So we're trying to encourage the cyclist to claim the lane, get in a better position, and not have vehicles squeeze by. So this is, good to a degree, but it does sort of have a bit of requirement on that fairly confident cyclist, doesn't it? Certainly not letting the 8-year-old or encouraging the 8-year-old to claim the lane when there's a four-wheel drive bearing down on them or the like. So we've sort of continued to work on these sorts of designs, and I'll come back to some of the other newer designs, which are really, I suppose, the gold standard in cyclists at roundabouts for those sorts of areas. Two-lane roundabouts are extremely challenging, even more challenging, because as you think about it, a cyclist approaching this, if they want to turn right, well, they're going to have to be crossing a lot of streams of traffic that are going through. So having this one going that could go through there, so the cyclist has to sort of navigate across that. It's quite a treacherous spot. So the idea of sort of separating the cyclists out onto these dedicated cycle facilities around these roundabouts is becoming more commonplace. And I'll put this one up first, but I'll go back to the lower volume, lower order roads one in a second. But the idea of separating out the cyclist to a dedicated cycle facility that may cross a road with priority or may not. And instead of the cyclist trying to sort of navigate across there, providing this stagger, and then the cyclist can continue on their journey back in there. These are, I suppose, concepts for these larger multi-lane, higher speed roundabouts as ideas. But there's certainly a reality once we're into the some of these smaller areas. And these are the kind of urban style roundabout best practices that we're seeing out there for cyclists, where it's the same idea that the cyclists, if they're coming along here and they want to turn right, they get in here and they sort of go around the facility like that and continue on. This one also obviously has the pedestrian priority facilities as well there with the raised crossings, the wombat crossings. So that one's been built. That's Moray Street in South Melbourne for those from the area. We've done an evaluation of that, independent evaluation of the effectiveness, and it works quite well. The majority of cyclists sort of use the facility. Some still do elect to choose to use the traffic lane, and we get great slowing down. And you can see the sort of gap here where this car, if they came up here and there was a cyclist coming, they'd prop there, which still keeps the circulating carriageway open, at least for one vehicle. So pretty good stuff there, and some ideas on what you could do there. There are lots of different attempts at trying to sort of create safer environments for cyclists. This one I found interesting. Sort of as a road safety auditor, I like some of the ideas, but I think there's some dangers there, which is to create these things here, which one of our designers calls a mammal pouch, which is where the cyclist would come in here and then prop here as they waited for the gap to be able to go across, and prop here and then or continue on through. Now, I think there's some sort of dangers associated with larger vehicles turning here, with having storage of a vulnerable road user that close, and the trailers coming through and the like. So there were some concerns sort of around those as well. Another attempt here. This one's a bit easier across the top of the T-junction, where the cyclist facility goes off-road here and then comes back on road. It doesn't help with that right turn, but it separates it away through there. But again, this one, so you might sort of look at the design and you think that's very good. That's all seems to work well. There's not too much extra risk there. And then you go and look at it sort of implemented and built once they've gone through that. And you see that the cycle facility is here and it's been purpose built. That's just for cyclists. But it kind of looks like a footpath, doesn't it? And if I was a cyclist and was riding along there, I would sort of just assume that that's the end of my lane and go out to there. I mean, it's got a tiny little cyclist only sign, and I'm not quite sure what that's referring to. So, this team has spent a lot of money adding this cyclist facility, and then I don't really feel it's going to get used. So a little bit of work to encourage cyclists or to highlight that this is a way that the cyclist could be going would be wonderful. And that might be a good use of green marking, not the conventional use of green marking, green pavement marking, but nonetheless has started to be used a bit like that. And here's a sort of example for that. It's trying to guide the cyclists down to where they're going. The traditional use of green marking was to point out conflict points between cyclists and passenger vehicles, and so that the passenger vehicle, the driver, would be alert to the fact there could be a cyclist coming. But it started to be used a little bit more as a guiding element to show cyclists the way to go. I'll pause there, Kathy, in a second, I suppose, and just see if there's any questions or comments. And I'll check how I'm going for time. Yep.
Oh, you're pausing now, or you're?
Yeah, no, I will pause now.
Okay. All right, terrific. With the bike lane that was just off the Wombat crossing, would it be sloped to cater for cars? But would that be comfortable for the cyclist to traverse?
I think we're talking about this one. Would it be sloped for cars, and would it be comfortable for the cyclist to traverse? So this one obviously is on a sort of flat grade, and the ramps are this side of it. When the cyclist comes in, it's sort of got design. Is that good? Yeah, it's sort of got it's a bit hard to see anywhere. Here we go. The cyclist, it sort of ramps up over a period there for the cyclist to go around. So I hope that answers that question.
We'll hear back from Dominic if you'd like some more clarification on that. And the only other question at this stage was, are you allowed to ride on the footpath in Victoria? And even I can answer that one because I've got kids under 12. So you can with kids under 12, but and children obviously themselves can, but not if you're above that age or above 13, I think it is.
Some jurisdictions have allowed riding on the footpath in recent legislative changes, and yeah, it's an interesting one. You're going to have obviously cyclist pedestrian issues arising. Is the risk of that less than the risk of using the roads? You've got all your driveway access point issues, which become more challenging. So I don't really have good answers on any of that. I'm sort of aware of some of the issues, but I'd be interested in other people's thoughts on that.
Okay, we've got some further clarification, actually referring to the Wombat crossing on the bottom of the slide in the previous slide, but maybe it was an illusion. Okay, let's go one back from there, Ken.
This
is this the one you mean, Dominic? Right.
Okay. Not sure. It is probably a bit of an illusion in terms of that looks like it's kind of steep, but it would ramp up like that. This is an artistic impression. Okay. Jump in any point, Kathy.
Just a further question, querying the footpaths, because the slide showing the approach to the roundabout on the Princess Highway where the bike path looked like a pedestrian footpath.
That one?
I think that's the one, yeah.
So, yeah, this is actually a newly built cycling facility. It looks like a footpath, doesn't it? And cyclists are not meant to be riding on the footpath in Victoria. However, they've tried to market and say, well, no, this is a cycle facility using that, which I don't think is going to work just based on the way that cyclists, especially in this area, if they're riding that, they're not, they're not really going to be riding on the footpath at any stage. The grade on that ramp, yeah, there's a little bit of grade there, but certainly I think just green marking to there and here would do the trick. Skid resistance would need to be good on the green marking.
Okay, carry on.
Thank you. Strip shopping centres and dooring. Dooring is a term which has emerged over the past decade of that act of a door opening and a cyclist striking it or avoiding it and being struck. And we do see the incidents of trauma are often the secondary hit. So the cyclist hits the door, falls into traffic, and there's an incident there. So it can be very hard to treat, come up with recommendations when you're doing an audit and you're worried about dooring, because the areas like this, for example, which are a clear way, meaning that these parked cars, at some point in the day, this is a lane that has cars going along it. So for us to sort of paint and create facilities here, at some point in the day, that is right in the middle of a lane. And so we couldn't be sort of painting our cycling facilities necessarily there. Removal of the parking permanently and utilisation of that for obviously cycling facilities are ideal, and creating separated facilities very challenging. When you do have the permanent parking, it becomes easier to create sort of cycle lanes. I do encourage you to narrow up your parking as much as possible to pull people further curbside. And there's been some work done to try to do even little bits of green paint right in the areas that you want the cyclists to be exactly writing. But we're still sort of left with the issue there. It's still a drawing possibility. Physically separated bike facilities is where everybody's wanting to try to move, and rightly so. And you did a little bit of a desktop exercise there, reviewing a Copenhagen-style lane like this one. And generally, they are providing a very good safety outcome, but they're not without their challenges. And certainly, we know there is still potential dooring, but if you can provide a buffered area there, so this is kind of good because the door won't quite get out there. But if it's just a very narrow bit of curbing to separate or the like, you've still got a passenger dooring challenge as well. You've got sightline issues for drivers pulling in here, turning in at these gaps where these cars are blocking the sight lines to cyclists. If you're contemplating bidirectional separated facilities on one side like this, or you're auditing that, that issue sort of goes even higher in terms of the risk, because the drivers are not often expecting, they'll be potentially turning in and looking for cyclists coming this way, but if there's one coming the other way as well, that can be quite a hazard. We have vehicles that are pulling out and then are going to be having their sight lines blocked further out and being propped out there, blocking the cycleway. One of the things I do as a simple little treatment is to try to put bluestone curbing, or even sort of armadillos, I'd call them, which are the tram separator razors. I don't know what their official term is. Sort of, I don't know. They're a plastic sort of rubbery spike down raised thing, but I like the bluestone curbing through here, just to try to slow drivers as they come in here, because you ideally want them to stop and pause there. There can be raised treatments that you can do through there as well. So these are the kind of things as an auditor you'd be picking up. You also want to be picking up things about tripping hazards, drainage. Was it going to drain? You'd want to be thinking about, are cars going to use these facilities? Is it clear enough that this is not a vehicle lane? And you might laugh at that, but we certainly had taxis parking in the first few of these when they were constructed, thinking that they were some sort of bay for them to be in.
Ken, is there a minimum and recommended width for a separated cycle lane?
Yeah, there are, and those are all in those documents that I provided. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact figures around that, but it's always worth having a look at in the different Austroads documents in the Australian Standard on those sorts of things. So here's an example, I suppose, of some of the newer thinking around these shared paths and them crossing side roads and the like, which they have to do. And to provide the cyclist pedestrian priority across these is very much something that people are looking to do. And so you actually, in Victoria at least, you essentially give the shared path almost road status. So vehicles approaching this have to, they're treating it like an intersection, which they don't have priority on. They stop and they give way. And raising it's a great way to reinforce that, to make it more obvious. Little signage intricacy on this one is that it should be signed actually like that under the new Victorian guidance. But of course, if you're auditing and you're noticing these things, you want to check the local guidance, and then you want to stand back and think whether it's an issue or not. Is it clear enough? And the like. And there's one Kathy took from the passenger seat of her car there, as we've now got her out there identifying different bits of the road network.
That was a fun family outing during stage 4, Ken. That's how exciting it got here.
There you go. That's right.
My poor family.
Yes, it's a bit like the Beer family going to a town 2 hours away, which takes us 5 hours because we stop at every roundabout and take photos. Anyway, there's another picture of sort of that from the cyclist perspective. And doing a cycling audit of a new facility like this, there's lots of stuff to look at this intersection. But one thing I want to highlight to you is that I like to think about this from the connectivity and the next intersection perspective. And this sort of, if you provide a couple of these in a row at crossing points, and the next one sort of looks a little bit like it, but maybe is not it, are cyclists, any cyclists can be confused that they don't have priority through the next one. And lots of little other treatments on offer. I like these one-way slow points in a residential style local area traffic management. So what they're doing is, it's a one-way slow point. So cars have to, decide who's going to go, and they slow down. But the cyclists aren't squeezed into that. They have a free run through. And that's really good because a lot of local area traffic management is done by squeezing up vehicles, and the cyclists get squashed in amongst that. So if we can, think of these, it's a much more friendly scenario. Have a look at that shared path audit guidelines because there's a lot of stuff in there that you want to be considering, and also the Australian standard as well, especially to look at. But common safety considerations: the width of the path, obstacles, hazards, horizontal and vertical alignment, surface conditions and quality, paths and intersections. And you've got to really get out there and ride it. So I quite enjoy this, getting out with a colleague, and we go and ride the route. We use a little dash cam on the bike. I take an electronic level to measure some grades and things like that. And, we've got something to measure heights of underpasses and those sorts of things. And out you go. And I'll tell you what, it's a pretty special experience riding around shared paths, auditing for a living. So get involved in that. But, some intersections, as paths intersect, there's some guidance here. You really want to, make it clear priorities, good sight lines, advanced warning, sign guidance, ideally 90-degree intersections and reduced speeds. Funnily enough, they're very similar principles to vehicle-to-vehicle intersections, aren't they? But this is an example there. Is it clear which has priority here? It's a little bit hard. Here's sort of an aerial image view of one where you've got this path coming down here and going under, and you've got, this is actually the main path. So this one has priority, but I dare say it's not obvious that if you're coming down here, you don't have priority. So a bit of line marking can fix those sorts of things.
What about drainage here, Ken?
At this one?
Just check with Simone at that one. I think at this one, no, the previous one.
Drainage here?
Maybe.
Sure. So I do have a couple of interesting ones about drainage. You would look at drainage if you think it's an issue. I have a couple of examples coming up, I think, which I like from a bigger picture perspective, but the drainage and the debris can be a little bit of an issue. So,
yeah, drainage on the previous slide.
Previous being that one, probably.
No, this one.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, so I'm not sure how that would drain it. May be an issue, yes, and certainly that would be something to have a look at. I'll keep moving on. These are an interesting. So this is Bendigo City Council, and they sort of elected to use one of their big drain structures and all the underpasses and create cycle facilities under. And I really love that. I think, grade separated cycling facility under, and it's wonderful because we don't need the cyclists to be crossing the major roads and the like. And you've got it almost pre-built. Yeah, you needed to do a little bit of work. So there's, you know, the issues along there. These ones, obviously, as the drop into there, which is quite severe and something that should be looked at. Again, these drop-offs and the challenges they get when they get the water flow through and the debris coming on, but the edge drop-offs in these things. And you may think, oh, you know, that's not a major issue, is it? Well, you know, the cyclists most of the time will be on there, but if a dog runs out, or if it's at night, or these sorts of things, that could be quite an issue. And even hazards close to the path are considered issues. Now, you know, lower risk issues. So there's some nice cycling fencing on this particular one, which was what you'd be expecting when you have those drop-offs in those large ways. So these you may want to just highlight or provide some sort of other delineation facilities. Again, these sorts of things in a shared path, very hard to remove or the like, but certainly at night is not going to stand out and should be something that's highly delineated at least. So here's another example of, again, another location where it's flooded, and this is a lot of jurisdictions or councils and the like say we can't possibly use our, you know, our underpass creek infrastructure for cycling. It's, you know, it floods sometimes, and you know, I think the Bendigo took a pretty good attitude of that. Is, you know, if it floods, they won't use it, or we'll put up some, you know, path closed signs or the like. But you know, 99% of the time, it ain't flooded, and it's a wonderful facility, and it should be used. But you do get this sort of stuff that needs to be thought about. And there's the fencing, the type of fencing, and there's all sorts of fencing out there, and a lot of it hasn't been thought about for cyclist safety. And so the ability to snag a handlebar, a pedal or the like is quite possible. So these are not cyclist fencing. These are more what you'd be expecting for cyclist fencing. And there are lots of design guidance and specific cyclist fences as well. Think about the back of guardrail systems and the issues that could present to a cyclist. So while this is a nice facility to separate vehicles from entering into the cycle facility, the back of those posts is quite a hazard for a cyclist if they were to leave their lane. Again, another one where councils have been sued successfully by injured parties for that. And you can put another rail on the back of those sorts of things. There are now better barrier systems available that can sort of cater for some of these sorts of things. So your barrier designers can help you out with that. But as an auditor, you can really point out these issues early on. Stopping vehicles getting into areas is good, but we've got to think about how we do that. This is not going to be great for a cyclist, especially this chain, which somebody's probably tied a bag there to warn other cyclists at night as they come and, you know, right up to that they're about to get run into a chain. So we want to see those delineated if they have to be there. And there's flexible sort of retroreflective bollards. I think this is a pretty good setup. If you need your cable stay to stay there, it'd be ideal to remove that. But if it absolutely has to stay, some good line marking. These are flexible bollards. They will flex, retroreflective marking, and it's quite a clear setup. So, you know, as a brief run through, what I've done is provided a fact sheet, a resource sheet for thematic road safety audits, which are these, the cycling audits. So thematic meaning, you know, a cyclist audit, pedestrian audit, motorcycle audit. And I've popped those into your memory stick on Schoology, so you can have a look at those and some of those other guidance documents. Time for a quick quiz Kathy, I think, and then I'm going to talk about motorcyclists. So that should have come up on your screen, but which of the following is not a common cyclist requirement of infrastructure? Separation, connectivity, cadence, clear sight lines. And what is the name for a shared space arrow? A chevron, a sharrow, a sparrow, or a marrow?
Oh, it's hard to fool this group, isn't it, Ken? They're onto it.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
All right, we're just going to close that off. I think there might be one more person, one or two, but just quickly put it in or not. Oh, finish that off. And here we go. And we had a couple of comments come in through the chat as well who were on the ball.
Ah, yeah, good. Those who couldn't see that. So, yep, cadence. Cadence is a bike term, but it's certainly not a road safety bike term. It's how quickly you're pedaling, or your pedal rate. So, I had to fool a few people, but didn't get many of you there. And sharrows, everybody got that. Well done. Is that shared out? Great. Okay. Well, we've talked about one two-wheeled road user. Let's talk about another. And let's talk about motorcyclists. Now, this is certainly an area that I've been working in for a long time, infrastructure for motorcycle safety, and it's a very interesting and challenging space. And so I'm going to show you a number of things, and the challenge I have in this one is to keep it to a 45-minute presentation. I prefer the 4.5-day presentation on this one, but nonetheless, let's jump into it. So a bit similar to the cyclists, what are some of the requirements for safe travel for motorcyclists? Where's the technical information? And common issues for an auditor when thinking about motorcycle safety and the treatments and terminology. So motorcyclists, depending on whose research you look at, somewhere between 20 and 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured compared to a passenger vehicle by kilometres travelled. So, no prizes for telling why that is. They don't have the cage to protect them and absorb some of the energy. They're inherently unstable because they're on the two wheels most of the time. The Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly documents, which I was involved in the development of the original ones way back in the day, and those are a suite of documents which different jurisdictions have put out their own slight tweaks on the original one that highlight quite a few of the infrastructure issues for motorcycles. So you should be able to find those by just Googling them, and you'll see there the one from Victoria. There's a New Zealand one, and then we've got New South Wales one there. So the sight, surface, signs, strike, speed. They're the big 5 S's that we think about as a road safety auditor when we're thinking about motorcycle safety. We talked about risk, and for the audit process, we're really thinking about likelihood times consequence. And, oh, that's not coming up. I'm just going to duck out of that and unhide something. There. To do that, obviously. That's good. I hope you're still seeing that, Kathy. Sight surface and signs are all really impacting on the probability of a crash, the chance that the crash will happen. Strike is the consequence. How bad is the crash when it happens? So what are the riders striking when they are involved in these crashes, or what's striking them? And the speed of both the rider and a vehicle influences both the probability and the consequence of that crash. So let's start with sight. Obviously, motorcycle is smaller than even the smallest passenger vehicle. Slightly taller in terms of eye height, which doesn't make a huge amount of difference. Occasionally, on a few little design tweaks, they might be. But that sort of the smallness of a motorcycle makes it easier to be hidden behind signs or the like. So there you go. You can see even this tiny little sign's covering up half the rider there. But other vehicles can hide riders. So when you're looking at an intersection design or the like, you've got to sort of imagine it. Not only will vehicles propped be able to see a rider, but are other vehicles going to be blocking sight lines with dynamic visual obstruction, masking style issues? In terms of a rider making decisions on these touring routes or where their riders are going faster, providing that information to a rider is so critical for them. And so this sign's doing a wonderful job, I suppose, in helping this rider identify what's coming up there. So, this really early guidance, consistent guidance is really important. This is a particular type of curve which we're trying to warn particularly motorcyclists about. Can anybody actually give me in the chat, a prize for this, what term would you put the technical term for this type of curve? There's a little challenge for people. We're getting some good answers, so we've got people saying hairpin, which is not quite right. I mean, it is a very tight sort of hairpin type curve, but it's the one that sort of tightens up. We've got spiral as an answer, which is again a sort of common term that might be used for it, but it's not the term I'm looking for. And some different answers coming in. No, not quite there on the one I was looking for from anybody, which is a compound curve. It's got a compound curve. Also, sometimes people call it a double radius curve. So the difference between this and just a normal very sharp curve is that it's got these two radiuses. So it's got one radius, which is fairly easy, and then it tightens up to a second radius. And this is particularly dangerous for motorcyclists. When these signs go out on compound curves, they're usually supplemented with a curve tighten sign or something like that. But as an auditor, if you identify any compound curves, that is a very high risk area for a motorcyclist, in particular. Here's one, for example, it's got a radius of 252 coming in, and it tightens up to a 117. It's a bit of tightening up. It's got a bit of a gravel road here with probably some debris on the road as well. 4 motorcycle crashes in a 5-year period outside a curve there. And no doubt it's because it tightened up on the rider and they weren't quite expecting that. So riders, I suppose, as they go around this curve, they've locked into a line and a riding speed. And as it tightens up, the physics doesn't allow that overcorrection and things that cars can have. And the rider ends up on the wrong side of the road, or if it curves the other way, they end up into the roadside. Vehicle 1 turning in here and vehicle 2 coming along here. Which one, pop it into the chat, do you think is more often the motorcyclist? I mean, could be either, but more often we see this as the motorcyclist. And good, lots of answers coming in. And it's 2s all round. Well done. Yep, absolutely. And 2 is more often the rider because of that fact that they're smaller, they're easier hidden behind vehicles with the sight lines looking through these other vehicles. So what can we do? Actually, that's a ground level view of that one where you can see this Pajero or whatever it is turning in. All the sight lines are blocked. So there's issues with car crashes like this, but there's also motorcyclists are more susceptible, more vulnerable to injury, smaller, harder to see. We see the same crashes for bikes as well in these scenarios where there's a bike lane. What we can do, I mean, you can link your signals and put another set of signals down here. So you block that when the queue gets back. They can be drop-in signals, as in only have an orange and a red, not a green. So, you know, those are possibilities. Cheaper alternative, you can move the give way line back a little bit and try and open up some sight lines. This is a pretty massive give way and a very odd give way, but nonetheless, doing that would open up some sight lines really well. And clearing out those sight lines are good, or trying to do that. So here you go, the motorcyclist behind the tree just at that point in time. So thinking about these things as a road safety auditor, where you may not think of that as a sight distance issue in our normal considerations, but it may be for a motorcycle. So when a rider goes around a curve, the rider leans and the center of gravity is sort of pushed out a little bit. And so any surface issue becomes much more of a concern for a motorcyclist than any other road user. Cyclists have the same issues, but are not usually going as fast. And we know that a motorcyclist sort of takes a few different lines through a curve. And we know there's braking on the approach. And these areas become extra important for the surface. And we want to provide that high skid resistance, consistent surface throughout the entire route if we can, but especially concentrating on areas where a rider is braking or leaning. They're the most important for a really good surface. So we want these good skid resistance, consistent surfaces, which I know are, throughout all of your networks, no doubt. Well, unfortunately, they're not, are they? We know we see things like depressions in the road, and that destabilizes the rider. They lose traction, and especially around curves and the like, can really destabilize riders. You have some sort of road management plan or some sort of requirements for intervention at different threshold levels in terms of the road maintenance and the like. Those threshold levels are not designed for motorcyclists, I can tell you that. They are easily things within intervention levels across pretty much all jurisdictions we've had a look at, are not not really considering motorcyclists. And we call motorcyclists the canary in the coal mine when it comes to surface issues. They're the first ones to be killed or seriously injured with surface issues before they get to the point where it's bad for the rest of the four-wheeled and larger road users. So certainly this sort of stuff is going to be obviously very bad for a motorcyclist hitting that at high speeds. And you might say, well, they're going to see that. Well, you've got to think at night. And you've got to think if the rider's following behind cars or trucks and there's maybe a bit of rain and a bit of fog on the visor, it becomes, something that they may hit by surprise. That's not going to be good for any road user, but particularly bad for riders. Any things around a curve are particularly bad as well. And even around roadworks and the like, trying to keep it clear of debris, rocks and the like can be challenging, mud dragging out on the road, but these are all sort of surface issues, and motorcyclists will be the ones that will pay the biggest trauma price of this sort of stuff. Even to the point of how we do patching and the like on these popular motorcycle touring routes. And this sort of is a bit of a classic where we see the patch there, and it's good that it's been patched, but it would be so good if that could be patched out to at least center line, because that connection is going to be the point where it's going to fail at some point, most likely. And that's going to be right in the rider line, as you can see there. And this one seems to have failed right in the middle. This one's an interesting one where it's on a curve. There's not great sight lines because of the vegetation. It's on a very popular motorcycle route, and a rider is coming in this at a line, and really their only choice on the lean and the line and the speed they're going is to go to the outside of this. That the physics does not allow them to sort of come inside it. And so they're pushed on to the wrong side of the road, or to try to pull the bike upright and try to navigate through that. And that will push them to the wrong side of the road anyway. So we need to, if we have these issues, which ideally we wouldn't let these issues out there, but if we do, very early warning of hazards to alert riders to these sorts of things. The slippery surface created by metal utility cover plates, temporary or even permanent, sometimes is an issue that needs to be looked at. And these sorts of things, again, think of it when it's a bit wet, it's a bit dark, the rider's following the car. We've got quite a bad mix going on. So you can get good coloured skid resistant coverings for these if you need to do surface covers. The bolts sticking up aren't great there, but at least it's got a good skid resistance and it's got a good colour, so it's a couple of things to help there. And thinking about where we have the services. So if you're looking at designs of roundabouts or new intersections or the like, and there are services that are going to be in these different areas, like in a roundabout like this, yes, it's going to cost money to move the services out. But if you're at design stage, this is better, and it's certainly going to be a challenge for a rider as they circulate around the roundabout. We can improve the skid resistance of surface in many ways, and that makes it better. You can do water blasting, which is a good one, and that can improve skid resistance. You can do different surface treatments. This is an example of one on the approach to an intersection, and through the intersection, the skid resistance was improved, but not that point on, because that's the lower risk area for a rider, because they're not likely to be braking heavily or avoiding anything in the intersection. They're through, and it's a lower risk point. And when we come to road safety barriers, the first thing I suppose to mention, actually I'll come back to barriers in a second, but sealing up to the edge of the barriers can be very helpful, because if a rider goes in a little bit hot into a curve, they drop a wheel into an unsealed shoulder or the like, if it was unsealed, they're very likely to go into the barrier in this case. I'll come back to barriers for a little more chat about that, because it's always an interesting topic when you talk motorcycle safety and people want to talk barriers for one reason or another. The curbing type can affect motorcycle safety. The basic rule is the more mountable the curb, the better for a rider, because a barrier curb like this is enough to destabilise a rider. In fact, quite a small lip is enough to destabilise a rider. Certainly, some of these have to be used in different scenarios for drainage and purposes and the like. But here's a little video, and hopefully it'll stream for you, that will show a small lip, how small a lip can destabilise a rider. I don't think this is... Just muted the video. It's quite loud. I don't know if that streams through, but so I like that video for a couple of reasons, and I don't put too many videos in the online courses because they sometimes don't stream too well. But I hope you saw that. You could see there that very small lip destabilizes the rider. They're off, and then they hit onto that grab rail, which is sort of there for cyclists who are going across to grab onto, so they don't have to unclip and the like. I showed that in New Zealand a while back, and they said, "Hey, bro, come and have a look at our grab rails." And that wasn't a good New Zealand accent. I apologise to our New Zealanders. Here are some PVC piping grab rails, which, as they will break off on impact. I thought, it's innovative. I like it. I don't know how it'll go with UV light, but I like the idea nonetheless. And thermoplastic line marking is really a bit of a slip hazard for riders, a bit the same as those steel plates and other things. But wet thermoplastic line marking is not a great thing to have, especially where riders are leaning or they're trying to brake. Now, I'd say that for those of you that get into auditing in a big way and you do lots of audits, it won't take long before somebody will put a design in front of you that proposes large painting on a part of the road. Often, people want to paint big stop signs on intersections where they've had overshoot crash problems or something like that. The danger we have in that sort of stuff is the skid resistance issues for motorcyclists. I mean, if you've got an intersection with an overshoot issue, pasting big thermoplastic line marking right at the point where a rider may need to be taking emergency braking or the like is not going to be a great thing. And there's probably better ways that we can alert road users. So you don't want to see these big sways of thermoplastic line marking. There's you can do that in other ways. Signs, motorcycles are very attuned to signs, so pick up lots of clues. We showed that other compound curve warning sign, which I think is a really great sign for people to be considering using on those compound curves. But it's a hell of a lot cheaper than ironing out your compound curves, I'll tell you that. And it's very effective. Motorcyclists are alerted to it. We do have these specific motorcycle warning signs in a lot of jurisdictions available if there's a specific hazard that motorcyclists will be particularly impacted by. So maybe uneven surface, rough surface, loose stones, or these sorts of things. Ideally, you'd get rid of that hazard rather than putting up a warning sign. But these sort of things might be because there's a quarry or something and, there's rock consistently in the area or this is, in the year or so before it gets to getting a pavement maintenance work done. And certainly just the usual run-of-the-mill warning signs are very effective for riders. Quick little quiz, Kathy, and then I've got a couple more, a handful more slides about motorcycle safety, and then I'll introduce the assignment. So hopefully we've got a quiz there. Which of the following is not a consideration for motorcycle safety and road safety audit? Sight, speed, sign, sound. What type of curbing is safest for motorcyclists? Barrier curbing, semi-mountable curbing, or mountable curbing? Pop your answers in there. And remember, you're not being marked on these ones. These are just a bit of engagement and the like, but you will have a quiz at the end, which has These sorts of questions. Okay, which of the following not a consideration? Yes, well, sound, most of you got that. Sound is not a consideration in a road safety audit. We focus on the road safety issues, and you know, loud motorbikes and the like are not our concern from the road safety perspective. The type of curbing, we said the more mountable, the better, and mountable curbing is our best if we can, but obviously you need to think about that from a specific you know, area perspective. Thanks, Kathy. That's excellent. Let's talk now about the strike hazard for motorcyclists. And this is a little bit of, I got a graduate back quite a while back to just go through a heap of motorcycle crashes and tell me where the motorcyclists were crashing on the different curves. Quite a mountain of motorcycle crash. These are on like motorcycle touring routes, so not urban areas as such. And 79% to the outside of curve, yeah, there's a bit of a split there, but not so many to the inside of a curve. And that's really, the riders don't overcorrect into the inside of the curve the way passenger cars will. Passenger cars, you'd see closer to a 50-50 on the outside of curve to inside of the curve, and the inside are overcorrect. They've gone a bit hard into the curve, dropped the wheel, corrected it back onto the road and flung into the inside of the curve. So we're really focusing on the outside of the curve for motorcycle safety is the big issue. And we see things like this popular motorcycle touring route. For those New Zealanders, this is the Coromandel Loop, and you know, you can get a bit of surface issues here and then some concrete blocks right where the rider will end up. So obviously not going to be a good outcome. Even our galvanized steel posts are a strike hazard for a motorcyclist. We would term these frangible, but they're frangible for a passenger vehicle. Frangible meaning breakaway on impact. These are easily strong enough to kill a motorcyclist, and they've killed many motorcyclists and seriously injured many motorcyclists. So having a think about that, and even the placement of these posts, and can we consolidate or lessen? So maybe these hazard boards, do we need those two out there? Could there be one in the middle? Do we even need this weird hazard board here? It's probably going to block some sight lines. And then if a car was to pull out here and a rider was to mount that, they face the edge of a sign, which is a kind of knife blade, and galvanized steel posts. So this is just one example, but we certainly see these different products out there which have flexible, they're flexible products, and you'd use those on popular motorcycle routes. Or as a road safety auditor, you would be recommending their use on the very popular motorcycling routes where there's high likelihood of a motorcyclist leaving the road and hitting these. So you need to think about where you're making these recommendations. And riders lean as they go around a curve. So thinking about how close your furniture is to, your roadside furniture is to the curb there. So this one's pretty close. I dare say a truck will take that out before a motorcyclist, but you know, and yeah, here's just a staged photo to show you a rider leaning around a curve there. Also thinking about the gutters and the foot pegs, and you know, very high gutters around curves. So if you're using maybe a high profile barrier curb or something like that, thinking about motorcycle foot pegs if it goes around curves or if it sticks out on the line. And barrier systems. So there's been quite a lot of research into motorcyclist crashes with barrier systems, most of it driven out of the University of New South Wales, and summarising sort of decades of research. There's not a huge amount of motorcyclists hitting barrier systems and being killed or seriously injured, but there are some, and about half of them are on the ground sliding when they hit the barrier system. About the other half are trying to stay on control on the bike, hit the barrier and go over the top really quickly. So what can we do about those things? What can we recommend as auditors? What should we be thinking about on popular motorcycle routes? The use of underrun protection for barrier systems. So this is your rub rail or lots of proprietary products coming online now. Something so the rider rides along, slides along that rather than being stopped by a post. And here's sort of the before and after. You can imagine sliding along at 80 kilometers an hour. You would not want to hit one of those posts. You would have your limbs ripped off potentially, or there'd be a very serious or fatal outcome. Hitting that would still not be friendly, but it would be friendlier, and sliding along that, you dissipate energy over time. So these sorts of things can be retrofitted to existing guardrail, G4 or W beam, depending on which jurisdiction you're in. And you can see there that that's being retrofitted. Little thing to note there is the bracket that sits out for a lot of these. You've got to look at how they're, look at the installation sheets and the design, make sure it's being done right. Here's a video of a motorcycle crash test, the European crash test. So that's 60 kilometre per hour, 80 kilogram dummy into post at whatever angle that was. And you should have seen there that it absolutely obliterated the dummy. The addition of the rail does a good job in terms of deflecting, and the rider sort of it absorbs a bit of the energy there, and it dissipates some of it along the barrier system. So that's really quite beneficial. So you notice here that the underrun protection has not been put over the terminal. And again, as a road safety auditor, these are things you would be hoping that would be picked up if you got out there to do a post-opening road safety audit and you'd seen that they'd connected the rub rail all the way through the terminal. We're hoping that the auditors would be picking up, well, that's going to change the way that terminal functions. And you know, has that been tested? Is that designed for? What will it do? We don't want to put any other road users at risk. So terminating it there is what we'd expect for the terminal. And wire rope barrier. It's often, you know, the motorcycle community will call it the cheese cutter or cheese grater or these sorts of things, and make it out to be the biggest killer of motorcyclists. It's not. Motorcyclists do the same thing. They're either sliding, they hit the posts, or they hit the barrier, they go over the top. The wires don't seem to play a role whatsoever in terms of any slicing or anything like that. And in fact, we use wire rope systems predominantly on straight roads. In fact, you can't curve a wire rope safety barrier more than 200 metre, smaller than a 200 metre radius, because you tension the thing up and the posts will pop into the middle of the road or outside, because it's a tension system. So we use these on straights where it's less likely that riders are going to leave the road, and we have to use a W-beam system on these very windy, popular motorcycle touring routes. So it's very low risk with these for motorcyclists. But if there are situations where you as an auditor believe you know something, some jurisdictions use a post cushion. It's a padding around the post. Here's an example, I suppose, of one. And you know, so you might suggest something like that could go there. These are not going to be as effective as a system that a longitudinal runs the motorcyclists along the system. This is trying to absorb energy over a very small area, sort of a football goalpost padding theory. But there's going to be some speed of crash in some circumstances where it'll provide a benefit. But it's not the be all and end all. It's not going to make everything great. And they cost a fair bit. I think they're for $55 a unit or something. So you can see this one goes on and on and on and on. And the reason this one got the addition of these is because this is the South Gippsland Highway. which is the route to the Motorcycle Grand Prix. And so on a handful of weekends a year, there are just huge numbers of motorcyclists going down there. And we see, the risks are elevated. So the auditors in this instance said, they actually looked at crash data and they said there's a lot of motorcycle crashes on this road, and we suggest that this additional treatment might be considered with your central barrier system. I mean, this is old. I would use a back-to-back flexible W-beam system with underarm protection now every time in this situation, but nonetheless, that was before those sorts of things existed. And there you go, some nice pictures of roads that have been retrofitted with motorcycle features. A couple of common sort of things post-opening audits, people connecting the underarm protection directly to the post. You lose all that cushioning advantage. It leaves sharp bits and areas where riders can fit a leg or an arm through, and that's not going to give us the benefits that we want. Again, bits for arms and legs to get under, and big concrete blocks if they do run along and into these concrete blocks. Ideally, we'd like to improve this. The whole sort of old bridge setup is challenging there. And speed. I'll finish off with speed, and then we better introduce the challenge. So speed can be influenced by many ways, and it's going to improve the likelihood and the severity. Good delineation through a curve will certainly do it. Advisory speeds are wonderful. And the key important thing about advisory speeds is consistency. And in fact, this is a really good thing all across the board for motorcycle safety. Consistency, consistency, consistency. Don't give the rider any surprises. And so if, this curve's 35, the same radius curve should be 35, the same radius curve down the road should be 35, and in the other region, it should be 35. We need to be consistent with this sort of stuff. And the same with warning signs and the like. You can do motorcycle audits, and that's where you get a rider, and the rider communicates with the audit team. The rider themselves could be an auditor. We do it with a variety of different riders. Sometimes we like to get Wendy involved because she gives us a female perspective and the like. We get other riders involved. We kit up the bike often with different instruments that measure different things, and we get the rider communicating with the car and recording their ideas, their thoughts, what they're feeling, and you can mix that in with your road safety audit, and you can come out with your different audit reports. Again, I've given you a fact sheet on that one in case you want to have a look and get a bit more detail on that, but happy to talk. Okay. That's what I wanted to cover, Kathy. I ran a little bit quick at the end there, but I did need time for us to introduce the exercise. I do have a case study. Should we do the case study? I'm going to do the case study. I've got a couple of minutes. Sorry, Kathy. Oh, okay, you've got Schoology up. Okay, do that. And then we'll come back and do the case study.
Okay. So, not in Module 3. In Module 5 is what we're looking at. Okay, so a couple of things in this particular module is you have a safe work method statement and agreement. So we've prepared one for you. Now, if your organisation has an overriding one, then you need to follow your organisation's one as well in there. Now, there are some particular COVID guidelines in there that probably are quite strict in Victoria. So everyone else should be okay with that one. And if you can just click off the agreement in there as well. Now, your audit location is, or your design is in here. So we'll just have a quick look at one of them. So everyone has a folder and their site plan is in there. And a good idea will be to have a look at this and just download it. And you can save it onto your, there it is there.
Okay, there's Adrian's one.
In South Australia.
Conceptual level design there.
Yep. And then Ken has helpfully put together your road safety audit report template, which is also in on your USB, but here it is here, and this is the Word version. And while that's coming up, Ken, I think you've helpfully highlighted what people need to do. Yes.
Yes, so what I did was get a road safety audit template. So you're welcome to, reuse it and rebrand it yourself after. Feel free to do that. But all we want you to do is replace anything that's highlighted in yellow. So put your road name, the stage of audit, which you're all going to be at concept stage or preliminary stage design. And don't worry too much if you sort of don't get exactly the right stage, but one of those early design stages, as in you go, I'm not sure whether this is feasibility or a preliminary design. You can put either. And just fill out those highlighted bits, a bit of an executive summary there. Update the table of contents once you're done, any abbreviations you're using. Keep going. So I've left all of that in there, which is sort of background about what a road safety audit is and the like. It's fairly standard stuff that people use in their road safety audit. Feel free to copy the words that I've got there if you're ever doing audits. It's good that we get sort of consistent messaging out there. So what we do, and I talked about this, is you put in information about when you've gone to site, and we're going to ask you to go to the site during daytime only. We're not going to make you do a nighttime inspection on this one, just to keep our OH&S checks in place. In a real audit, you do that nighttime as well. And you're not going to have a pre-audit meeting, and you're not going to get as much information as you want. So you're going to have to make assumptions and guesses at things. But for the purposes of the training exercise, you should be right to find a few issues. You're going to jot down the plan, any plan number that's on there. And that's a good practice. And then you're going to write a very brief description of the scope of the works based on what you can see, and a little map of where it is. And this is all stuff you put in a real audit report. And then this is where you're probably going to spend most of your time, is coming up with what did we say, Kathy? Between 3 and 5 findings.
That's right.
So we don't want more than 5, and I know some of you will come up with many issues that you would like to put in an audit report. We're limiting you to 5. 1, because we don't want you to spend excessive time working on this. 2, because I don't want to have to mark big long audit reports. But I want enough to prove that you understand that. You see there, we've given a couple of examples. You've still got examples in there. And that's there to help you out a little bit in your thinking. But you just delete those and replace with your findings. Snips, photos are very useful, and we'd like to see those. So between 3 and 5 findings. So you go replace those, and then you sign the audit report. As you sign all your audit reports, and you put a picture. You can put a couple of site pictures if you want, but the one picture we want to see, which won't be in this example, is one of you on site. So we know that you actually went to the site and had a look. And the reason you go to the site is because you gain a better, richer understanding of the functioning, the operation, the use of the site, little bits and pieces you just can't pick up from street view or photos. And we want you to get out there, look at it, spend a bit of time there, get a real feel for it. We don't want you spending any time doing things like measuring lane widths, spending a lot of time on the road or anything like that from an OH&S perspective. The older sites we've looked at, have areas you can safely observe the road without having to be in a very dangerous high-speed area. So have a look at it before you go there on Street View or something. Work out a plan, work out where you're going to park, that you're not going to get in the way of other road users, make them do dangerous things. And we certainly don't want you doing anything that would be dangerous. So follow your organizational occupational health and safety requirements and wear your high-vis vest. And we have a safe work method statement which has been put in there. And one of your questions in the quiz is, is it the only question in the quiz? Or anyway, you have to just say that you've had a look at that and you're going to follow it. And you're not going to you're not going to go and do your site visit when you're intoxicated, and you're not going to create hazards for others and all of that sort of stuff. So it's in Module 5, all that information. We're finishing off Module 4 now, which we've got you've been through. There's the information in there, and you'll have to do the quiz, be it one question or more. And interestingly, I see that I have pre-recorded some of these case studies for you, so you can watch them in your own time.
That's right, Ken. And this Module 4 quiz is just the Wally question, so we've made it a bit easier for you this round.
So just a Wally question for this one, and the Module 5, you still have to do a quiz, am I right?
Module 5 is just the ticking off the safe work method statement.
Yes, so you have to tick that to say, I will behave sensibly on site.
That's right.
And as I say, we've reviewed the sites. They can all be done very safely if you common sense about it.
And all the sites are, according to Google, somewhere between a 5 and 15-minute drive for everyone. There might be a couple that are a tiny bit more than that, but we've tried to make them as close as possible to your home or workplace or the address that you've given us. So if you have any concerns or any issues, or it turns out that you don't live there anymore or something like that, please get in touch with me and we'll conjure up a new site for you.
And the safe work method statement, you'll see some COVID safe procedures, things like don't lick the stop button and those sorts of.
It's not in there.
It's not in there?
Oh, maybe we should put it in there.
Some common stuff, so common sense stuff. All right, I think you'll all enjoy it, but I do want to really reinforce, which we've done before, we are here to help you. So if you get that, you look at your design and you go, I can't see any, I don't even understand what they're planning to build or these sorts of things. Get on the phone early. Let's have a chat about it. We'll organise a Zoom. We'll FaceTime in while you're, out there on site if you want. And we can talk you through different parts of it. If you get to the writing up of the audit and you're not quite sure about different bits, you feel free to email through or call with a question. Also, feel free to have a go at it, submit it, and we'll mark it and we'll send it back. And if you haven't done so well, you can always brush it up and resubmit it. I think you'll
it's the sort of thing you enjoy, Ken. It's not due by next Thursday, so we give you another week or so, but keeping in mind that it is that mad rush to the end of the year, it would be great to get it in before we do close for the year, so we can get you your certificates and everything organised shortly after that. So if you can, in the next week, between today's session and our last session next week, try and get out there to site and get your report going. That would be terrific. And any questions now, whilst we've hit everyone with all this information? Just give everyone a few minutes to think of some questions.
I'll just a little bit of my tips again. Remind, I've said this before, is you're going to look at your design, you're going to get your head around what they're doing, have a quick street view look around it, get an idea. then get out on the site and then do some imagining. Just look at it and go, okay, I see what it's going to look like when it's built, right? And then start imagining how it's going to be used. Okay, people are going to be driving from that way in that lane, they're going to turn right there. They're going to be waiting to turn right. Can they see everything? What about a pedestrian? Pedestrians are going to walk from here to there. What's they going to do? Is that their desire line? Are we pushing them in? And so you're just really starting to conjure up these. You can use, and I really encourage you strongly to use the checklist. Get one of the early checklists, the concept design checklist, the preliminary design checklist, and go through it and see if it sparks any ideas. Don't hand that in though, just use it to guide and help your thinking.
And the checklists are in the back of part 6 or 6A?
6A.
6A.
In the back of part 6A. And if you look in last week's slides, I tell you the exact pages, but you'll find them, they're at the back. They're the sort of last 50 pages.
50 pages. So we have one more session left, one more live session left, which is same time next Thursday, is Thursday today. And so basically the idea is that you work on this throughout the next week and if possible submit your report by next Thursday. Otherwise you can get a little bit of extra time to get it in the week after. Do we have any
in terms of deciding how long we expected to be spending on this, we generally think around the 2 hours is sufficient. We've provided you that template, and we only want those 3 issues to 5 if you're desperate, and that bit of time on site. You don't need to be on site for excessive amounts of time, just enough to get a good feel for it and the like. So we think 2 hours should be sufficient to knock something together that will be quite a nice product, which proves you understand the process and you're able to find issues and risk rate them and provide recommendations.
Right.
All right, good session. Thank you very much, and thanks for all the input on the chat. It's very, very good. I enjoy it.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.